Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Have you ever noticed how your daily routines subtly shift as you get older? Maybe breakfast creeps a little later now, or perhaps dinner moves around a bit. What if those, seemingly small changes were actually incredibly significant indicators, maybe even pointing towards your overall health and, well, even your longevity? Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take your sources, could be articles, research papers, maybe even just notes you've jotted down, and we really dig in. We unearth the most important nuggets, trying to give you that shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we're diving into something truly fascinating, the timing of our meals, especially as we age. We've got a recent health news piece from Mass General Brigham and also a really detailed scientific paper from Communications Medicine.
Yeah.
It's about a significant long-running study. Our mission here is to, unpack these findings, go beyond the headlines, understand what they mean for your health. We want to explore how something as basic, as fundamental as when you eat, could be whispering secrets about your well-being. Okay, let's get into it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting field, sometimes called chrononutrition, basically how meal timing interacts with our body's internal clocks. And what's particularly compelling about the sources you've brought is their focus on older adults, how these patterns evolve later in life. That's a really crucial distinction, actually, from a lot of studies that focus on younger people. Our circadian rhythms, they naturally shift as we age. So understanding how meal times fit into that picture, it's vital.
That makes a lot of sense. Our bodies change, so maybe our routines need to adapt too. So for this specific research, what's the big question? What were the scientists really trying to pin down about these age-related shifts in eating times?
Well, fundamentally, they wanted to understand exactly how meal timing changes as people get older. That was the first part. And then, maybe even more importantly, how those changes relate to, concrete health outcomes and ultimately longevity. They weren't just looking for a trend. They aimed to connect the dots, see the real-world impact on health span and lifespan.
Right. And what I gathered is that this study really stands out because of its sheer scale and duration. It wasn't just a quick look, was it?
Oh, far from it. No, this was a massive longitudinal study, which, as many listeners probably know, means they tracked the same people over many, many years. That gives you a much more robust picture of long-term trends compared to just looking at a group at one point in time. They followed nearly 3,000 adults in the UK, community dwelling, so, living independently, and the age range was huge, 42, all the way up to 94 years old.
Wow. And for how long?
Over 20 years. It started back in 1983 and ran all the way to 2017.
That is an incredible amount of time to gather data. So what kind of information were they collecting over all those years? It must have been pretty comprehensive.
It really was. Participants self-reported their meal times and sleep times multiple times over the study period. They also filled out detailed health and lifestyle surveys, things like the Cornell Medical Index that assesses physical and psychological health issues, and the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, which is a standard measure for, how well people feel they're sleeping. Plus, and this is quite key, they provided blood samples for genetic analysis.
Okay.
Yeah, so researchers could look for links to certain genes related to circadian rhythms, the whole night owl versus early bird thing. And of course, crucially, they tracked mortality data over the entire follow-up. It's a very rich data set.
Okay, so after decades of collecting all this detailed information, What did they find? What are the actual patterns? How do our eating habits tend to shift as we get older?
The study showed a pretty clear and consistent pattern, actually. As people got older, they tended to eat both breakfast and dinner later. But interestingly, their overall daily eating window, the time between their first bite and their last bite of the day, that window tended to narrow. So later starts, later finishes, but squeezed into a shorter time frame overall.
Later but compressed. That's interesting in itself. But beyond just seeing the schedule change, did they find any specific meal timing, maybe breakfast, like you mentioned, that had a stronger link to actual health problems?
Yes, this is where it gets really, really interesting. Breakfast timing stood out significantly. A later breakfast time was consistently associated with, a whole range of health conditions. We're talking physical issues, things like fatigue, even oral health problems, which might seem odd, but can reflect wider systemic issues. And mental health challenges too, like depression and anxiety symptoms. It was also linked to an overall increase in having multiple health problems at once, what doctors call multimorbidity, and things like having difficulty preparing meals or reporting worse sleep quality. Those were also tied to eating breakfast later. It really paints a picture where a delayed breakfast isn't just, a scheduling quirk. It might be a flag for broader health struggles.
That's quite a web of connections, all linked back to the timing of that first meal.
Mm-hmm.
It does make intuitive sense, though, doesn't it? If you're dealing with fatigue or depression, your whole routine may shift, including when you feel up to eating. Did the study look into whether our genes might nudge some people towards these later mealtimes? You mentioned the genetic analysis.
They did, absolutely. And this adds another layer. They looked at the genetic data and found that people with a genetic predisposition to being a night owl, naturally preferring later sleep and wake times, they also tended to eat all their meals later, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Oh, yeah.
So it suggests there's this underlying biological drive influencing these meal timing preferences for some individuals. It's not just habit.
So it's potentially baked into our biology, not just a choice we make. If someone is a natural night owl, could it be that their internal body clock is sort of fighting against a typical early breakfast schedule, and maybe that mismatch itself is a stressor contributing to some of these health issues?
That's a great way to think about it, exactly. It's sometimes called social jet lag, this clash between our internal biological rhythm and the demands of the external world, like typical meal times or work schedules. Over time, that constant misalignment could create a kind of chronic low-level stress. It might disrupt hormones, metabolism, even immune function, potentially making people more vulnerable to fatigue, mood issues, and just a general decline in well-being. So the later breakfast might start as a symptom, but it could also become part of a cycle that perpetuates that biological stress.
That connection feels even stronger now. Wow. Okay, but the research didn't just stop at current health conditions. It looked longer term too, right? What did they find about meal timing and, the ultimate outcome, our risk of mortality?
Yes, and this is probably the most sobering finding, the one that really highlights why this matters. Later breakfast timing was associated with an increased risk of death during that long follow-up period.
Really?
Yes. The data was quite specific. For every extra hour that breakfast was delayed, the odds of mortality increased by about 1.08 to 1.11 times. They even identified distinct groups, an early eating group and a late eating group. And the late eating group had a noticeably lower 10-year survival rate. It was 86.7% compared to 89.5% for the early eaters.
Those are not insignificant numbers. It really changes how you might think about just, when you grab that first cup of coffee and toast.
Uh-huh.
So let's translate this. For you, the listener, what are the practical takeaways here? How should we interpret this for our own lives?
Well, the lead author, Dr. Hassan Dashti, made a really important point. He suggested that these changes in when older adults eat, particularly breakfast, could act as an easy-to-monitor marker. Think of it like a subtle signal your body might be sending. If you notice your own breakfast time gradually, consistently shifting later, it doesn't automatically mean something is wrong. But it could be a prompt, maybe a reason to check in with your doctor, just to explore if there are any underlying physical or mental health things going on. It's potentially an early warning sign that's worth paying attention to.
So it's about being attuned to our bodies and recognizing these shifts might be more than just convenience. Beyond being a potential warning sign, does this research suggest any proactive steps, ways to potentially promote healthier aging?
It does seem to point in that direction. The findings suggest that encouraging consistent meal schedules, maybe especially for breakfast, could become a simple, maybe overlooked, but potentially powerful part of broader strategies. Strategies aimed at promoting healthy aging and increasing longevity. It really adds this when dimension to our thinking about healthy routines alongside the what we eat.
And this focus on timing also bumps up against some current health trends, doesn't it? Like time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting. How did the study authors frame that?
Yeah, that's a really important nuance they brought up. They specifically caution that the health impacts of deliberately shifting meal schedules, like you see in some fasting protocols, might be quite different for older adults compared to younger populations. It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all scenario. Older adults might be more vulnerable to negative effects from mistimed eating due to existing health conditions, medications they might be taking, or just those natural age-related changes in their internal clocks. So their needs are unique, and it probably warrants a more careful, individualized approach rather than just jumping on a popular trend.
That's a crucial point, especially with so much general health advice floating around. Okay, now, this study sounds incredibly thorough, but like all research, it has its limits, right?
Right.
What were some of the limitations the researchers themselves pointed out that we should keep in mind?
Absolutely. Acknowledging limitations is key to good science. One major one is the reliance on self-reported meal times. While they collected data multiple times, it's still based on memory. And we all know memory can be tricky, right? Especially recalling precise times over long periods. So there's always a potential for some recall bias. The reported times might not perfectly match actual behavior day in, day out.
Makes sense. Were there other aspects of eating habits that this particular study didn't capture?
Yes, definitely. It couldn't capture everything. For example, it didn't really look at the frequency of eating, like how many times people ate per day, or the day-to-day variability beyond the snapshots they took, or snacking outside of the main meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And another potentially important one, it didn't assess the timing of specific nutrients, like protein intake timing, which we know can be quite important for older adults, especially for muscle health. These are all areas future research might delve into for, even more detail.
Okay. And what about the people in this study, the participants themselves? Does their background affect how widely we can apply these findings?
That's another fair point about generalizability. The group studied was primarily healthy, older adults living in the community, and they were predominantly of British European ancestry. Okay.
So while that makes for a strong study group because it's quite uniform, it does mean we need to be a bit cautious about applying these exact findings directly to other populations, people with different genetic backgrounds, different cultural eating habits, or those who already have severe health conditions might experience things differently.
Right. Context always matters. And the big one we always come back to with studies like this, correlation versus causation. You touched on this, but can you elaborate? The link is strong, but does later breakfast cause the problems?
Exactly. It's the crucial distinction. The associations are definitely strong and consistent. But because this is an observational study, we can't definitively say later breakfast causes poorer health or increased mortality. It's actually more likely, as we discussed, that the onset of illness or declining health leads to shifts in meal timing. So if someone's experiencing more fatigue or depression or physical limitations, getting up and preparing and eating breakfast early might just become more difficult. The motivation might not be there.
However, once those meal times shift later, it's possible that this altered timing could then potentially worsen existing conditions or create a feedback loop. It might act as an additional stressor or risk factor. It's like you said earlier, maybe the breakfast time is more like a sensitive biological marker, a signal, rather than the root cause itself.
A canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
Got it. Were there any other big factors, maybe not included in the analysis, that could be playing a role?
Well, they did control for many things, socioeconomic factors, lifestyle habits like smoking, existing health conditions. That makes the analysis quite robust. But one variable they noted wasn't explicitly included in the final models was physical activity level. So there's always a possibility of some residual confounding, meaning other unmeasured factors might be influencing both meal timing and health outcomes. It's hard to capture absolutely everything.
Okay, that gives us a really good balanced picture.
Yeah, and if we sort of step back and look at the whole picture, what's truly fascinating is how something we often view as just routine, when you have your breakfast, can be so intricately connected to so many different health markers, even our genetic predispositions, and potentially our overall survival rates. It really elevates the conversation, doesn't it? Beyond just what we eat to how our internal body clocks interact with our daily routines. The interplay there seems profound.
It really does add a whole new layer. It makes that old saying, breakfast is the most important meal of the day, feel more scientifically grounded, maybe. Especially, as Dr. Dashti highlighted, for older individuals, it's not just about the calories or nutrients, perhaps, but the actual timing and consistency, acting as this potential signal of overall health.
Exactly, and it prompts a really important question for all of us, I think. Maybe we need to shift some focus, not just concentrating intensely on what foods are on our plate, but also paying more attention to the when, particularly as our bodies age, because our internal clocks might become perhaps more sensitive to these external cues, like when food arrives. Maintaining those strong circadian rhythms through consistent meal timing, that could be a simple yet really powerful tool for promoting health as we get older.
So let's try and boil this down. What have we really uncovered in this deep dive? It seems that meal timing, and especially the consistency of your breakfast time, isn't just a minor habit. It looks like it could be a pretty significant indicator and maybe even a factor we can modify for healthy aging and potentially for longevity. This research really does challenge us to think a bit differently about our daily rhythms, doesn't it? So for you, the listener, maybe something to reflect on is this. Could making small, consistent adjustments to your daily schedule, particularly around that first meal, Could that be more than just a marker? Could it actually be a simple, proactive step towards a longer, healthier life? It's definitely a powerful thought to mull over. We really hope this exploration into your sources has given you that shortcut to being well-informed and maybe spark some new insights for your own health journey. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.